And it's quite profound, and I often walk out from that session a little emotional, and I'm hoping we'll give them tools to start doing it even themselves, and that just brings me joy.
Hey, that's amazing.
When my back happened, I had to actually, sounds really terrible, I couldn't actually walk for a couple of weeks, and I talked to over 20,000 kids in that job.
Welcome to Not the Rob Bell Podcast, where we talk with business owners, marketers, and professionals to extract what makes people and businesses successful.
Hey everyone, today I've got Erica Davis from Communication Generation. She's presented to over 20,000 kids to help them find their inner voice and communicate effectively as they grow up. We talk all things TV, radio, life skills, and so much more. It's coming up on the podcast now. Hey everyone. We anticipated this podcast as being a weekly event, but we thought with everything going on right now that twice weekly would be twice as good. So we might not hold this forever and we may go back to weekly, but enjoy the extra episodes right now. So thank you, Erica, for joining us on the podcast. It's really awesome to have you virtually here. It's really amazing.
What an incredible time of life it is that we can still connect like this, but have to be socially distanced. It's incredible.
It is pretty amazing. And I understand that you have just started your own podcast a few weeks ago as well. So we can see the mic in the corner there, and that's probably why your audio is going to sound absolutely phenomenal just the same.
Well, that, and I have been doing voiceovers from home for a very, very long time. So the fact that all kind of amalgamated in, well, we're stuck at home, got my mic, got my desk, and I can't be in schools right now doing my business. So I kind of put it all together and thought, we'll do a podcast instead.
Hey, and some things are just meant to be. And the interesting thing that you just told us offline was that Linda, our producer, is actually responsible for you finding your way into TV in the first place. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, it's a bit crazy, but all through high school, I was that student who was like, I'm going to be a film director. I'm going to be a film director. I'm going to go and find a film school. I'd go to the careers counselor teacher and I'd say every week, have you got anything new for me? And he'd say, no, Erica, we don't. You got to be 21 or over to do that course, or you've got to have experience. And I was 16, 17. And I found my way to CSU in Wagga, Charles Sturt University, where it was a production course for TV. And I thought I'll do that first and then I'll work my way into film and things like that. In my third year being there, your producer, a friend of mine, Linda, said, we don't have an actor to host our show we're doing. Would you like to do it? I went, me? I'm not a presenter. And she says, please, I'm desperate. I was like, okay. So I went and hosted her a multi-camera production and just laughed and smiled. And my lecturer said to me later, hey, you're not bad at that. I was like, yeah, no worries, whatever, and put it out of my mind for quite a few years, actually, before things actually started to happen.
Interesting. And so that spawned like a 20-something year career in TV as a presenter.
Yeah, absolutely. So because of the course that I did at the time, I'm not sure how things work these days because, it's been 20 years. But I was sent to Channel 7 on an internship, me and another guy, and we got to go to every single department. So I was at Summer Bay for a day. I was on Wheel of Fortune for a day. I got to hang out with Disney for a day and AFL. And it was just a really cool time in TV to be able to sit in on every single production that was happening at the time at the Epping Studios. And at the end of my time there, I was just this hyperactive 19-year-old. And I went to the head gentleman in charge of organising our internship, and I said, I will do anything. I will take any job, ground up. Just give me a job. I'd love to be here. He said, it's your lucky day. There's a spot going in the newsroom as a production assistant. Would you like it? I said, yes. When do I start? And as fate would have it, I started the week after my final exam at uni. So I was very, very fortunate to get a job so quickly out of uni.
Straight off the boat.
That's where it started.
Straight into the industry. Because that would have been not far. I understand you worked on the Olympics and the Commonwealth Games after that. You would have been fairly fresh and that would have been a pretty powerful experience so early in the career, right?
I can't tell you how I look back on those days and go, again, just so fortunate, so fortunate. I landed there while they were testing new technology of presenters being able to talk to their auto. I was doing auto cue, so I was helping them with scripts and script editing. And we had a presenter doing the Winter Olympics, and I was back at Epping trying to call it. And I was like 20 years old going, what am I doing? This is crazy. When the 2000 games hit, I was lucky enough to be on the ground at the IBC I'll tell you something, being in that crew was one of the most profound television experiences I've ever had. Even though I was a production assistant, so I was responsible for running around and doing all sorts of things. As soon as a gold medalist entered our tiny little space to come and do an interview with our on-camera talent at the time, everybody would stand up and clap. Like everybody in the room would just stand up and clap. And I just was teary on a daily basis being a part of that team. So again, I was 20 something and just lapping it all up, really. Yeah.
That's amazing. And I mean, we can see like you've got quite a bubbly extrovert kind of personality. How much of that is sort of was built into you, you know, just from your childhood, and how much of that has sort of been learned as, you know, in terms of just experience of being on camera?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I grew up, my dad in particular is a compere, a musician, singer, host, and he always just made it look really fun. In my business communication generation now, I talk a lot about, I say to kids, who hates public speaking? And I tell you half of them put their hand up. I say, who loves it? Sometimes maybe you get 10 or so kids go, I love it. And I always reflect for me that because of my upbringing, I always found speaking quite easy. I never saw it as being a fear, but I'm highly aware that it's not that way for everybody. So for me, if you got a list of questions on it, even in high school, you could make it this, you could do an essay, you could do a speech. I just would do speech straight away because it kind of, you know, I worked out over time that speaking publicly is actually a strength. But when you're young and you talk too much, it actually becomes almost a shameful thing. So it's like that kid's loud or that kid's noisy. So part of what I do with communication generation is the kids that speak a lot, but they're a little bit ashamed of being talkative, I help them understand it's a strength. But we also talk about how to use it effectively, as in don't cut your teacher off. Don't get sent into the corner because you don't know how to control your talent. That it is actually a strength. It's not a bad habit being able to speak. And for kids that can't speak confidently, well, we go through a process of talking about where fear comes from and how we can handle our fears and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, for me, I grew up in a house of loud, extroverted people and confident on a stage. But, you know, there's other things you've got to learn too about backing yourself and knowing that you have something worthwhile to say, not just talking a lot.
Of course. And so, I mean, we've just touched on it there. Now you're running Communication Generation, which is designed at bringing out those voices in kids. And because, I mean, you were one of the bubbly ones, but especially now in 2020, we have kids who are tied to smartphones, used to non-verbal communication with their friends for a large majority of what they're doing. So is that really what you're trying to combat, and how did this all come about?
Yeah, it's a great question. So throughout my career, again, lucky to land myself on Sydney Weekender where I got to present every week. But after I had my kids, because I'm a mum of 2 kids, I dropped my work back to 1 day a week where I would produce the segment, shoot the segment, and I had this extra time. When my kids got a bit older and it was time to return to the workforce, sort of full time, so to speak,
Yep.
I actually took a job as well as doing Weekender because I'm a bit crazy like that. I like doing a couple of different things at once. I don't know why. I was hosting a radio show. I did that for a little while. And then I found this job that I couldn't shake off. I'm going to apply for this and see how it goes with what I do. And I ended up being a facilitator for a company in behavior change programs. And I'd never heard of this before, but the ad was so incredible. It said, do you want to change the world? Do you love children? Do you value communication and all this kind of stuff? And I was like, I'm going to find out what this is. And after I applied for it, I realized it was mostly a presenting job. It was going in front of kids at schools and teaching them content that's already been written, but delivering it in a really powerful way and hopefully changing some behaviors in certain areas, that kind of thing. Did that for a little season, but ended up having a bit of a physical injury. I had a back injury and I had to sort of let that go for a while. While I was recovering, I was having a conversation with my husband and he said, do you want to go back to this? And I was like, I do, but I don't. I love talking to kids. I love the concept of behavior change. That is something I'm so passionate about. But the content, it's good for what it is, but it's not what's on my heart. He goes, what's on your heart? I said, without thinking, I went, communication. He goes, what do you mean communication? And I said, well, and I talked to over 20,000 kids in that job. From school to school. I'm talking from year 1 to year 6 at that time. And I said, they don't look me in the eye and they don't back themselves. And some of them, when I say, why don't you jump out the front and help me, they couldn't think of anything worse. And I got this real passion in my spirit. And I've got 2 kids as well who I've seen go through those year groups, and I've seen conflict in the playground stuff. And I've seen, I couldn't do that, I'm not good enough stuff. And I've just gone, you know what, there's a space here that I'm not seeing being filled. I mean, teachers obviously are beautiful and they've all thanked me when I come and they say, we tell them this stuff all the time, but you come in and make it really fun and they listen to you.
Yeah.
So that's sort of where it all started.
I want to pick up there in just a second, but something that I just learnt from that. So you're referencing Kerrigans Group and your time there.
Yeah.
So that's an interesting thing. I actually, so Kerrigans was founded by Daniel Sheehan, which, and I was familiar with his books, and he was a very young author. And I can't remember whether it was his first book or not. It was called Flip and came out in 2007. And that was not far after I'd actually started my own business journey. And so I was quite intrigued by his books and followed what he was putting out, and, would listen to his audio books on the way to meetings and things like that. Yeah. And because he was a real proponent of Gen Y and really trying to help corporates learn to talk I'll start that again. He was really trying to educate corporates in how to communicate with Gen Y, who was sort of this misunderstood generation. And of course, 15 years have passed now, and now it's all about the millennials and the Gen Zs, or, however you want to phrase it. But so I didn't quite appreciate from the understanding I had that you were doing that work, or that's the particular work that you were doing in Kerrigans. So can you, can you give me some understanding of the inner workings of how that all came about and what they were trying to achieve? And then I'd really love to come back to what you're doing now.
Yeah, awesome. So like I said, when I saw the ad, I was blown away. And I actually said in my interview that, I don't know, they may even remember us. There was 2 ladies and a gentleman who was the head creative officer. And they said, what made you apply? And I said, to be honest with you guys, I thought this was a scam. And they laughed. and then the head creative officer says, how do you know it's not? And that's when I knew I loved them, because they were hilarious.
That's got to be the best answer to the best answer I've ever heard. Yeah.
I did. And then I said, I'm a creative who loves a spreadsheet. And then he again said, thank you. I've been telling these people this for years. So we connected really quickly. And I would have stayed there for years doing that, except when my back happened, I had to actually, this sounds really terrible, I couldn't actually walk for a couple of weeks.
Sure.
And I was having lots of testing and MRIs. I had a disc slip thing. And they were beautiful. They wanted to keep me, and they were like, we'll do anything. And I said, look, I just can't guarantee that when I'm better, I'm going to be able to jump up and down and talk to you ones ever again. But love you heaps. And so we parted beautifully. It was all good. But being in schools on their behalf, their content was brilliant. It was written so well. And it was my first opportunity to understand what behaviour change programs were. And hearing, again, the chief creative officer speak to us as a group, I remember I was in Sydney at the Gallup building. We were having training, and I just ran into the break, rang my husband and went, I think I've just found my future. Like, this is what I want to do with my life. So, and I was still working at Sydney Weekender. And at the time, again, I was doing their training, and I got a call saying, Melbourne Weekenders just started. We need you down there in 2 weeks' time to get that show started. And I was like, how am I going to do all this?
Wow.
But I just made it work. And my family are very, very accommodating of my craziness.
And I mean, we all know when you're really doing something that you're passionate about, the lines blur and the energy required to turn up every day almost diminishes because you're just driven to do it anyway. And
unfortunately, I did put my back out. That was the consequence of doing too much. Yeah.
I know. We moved office in December, and I ended up in hospital, but that's another story.
Oh no! Yeah, I think I'm invincible is my problem. And then my body says to me, "Slow down, Erica," and then I have to pick what I'm going to do instead. So,
Yeah, I'm a little bit the same way. When people heard that I took myself to the hospital, they knew it was serious. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's a story for another time. So,
Yeah, right.
so fast forwarding back a few years, or fast forwarding again a few years, you've decided to venture out on your own and start communication generation. And how did that what was that cataclysmic, yes, I'm going to do this? Obviously you had that drive and you sort of felt that call to do it, but what was that pivotal moment where it all came about?
Yeah. It's really, I think, about aging and aging well. I often say that being able to back yourself and go, this is actually a good idea, can take a long time. For me, I love working for other people and giving them my best. I'd never done anything like this, where it's like me taking an idea of mine and going, let's see where it lands. And so it happened over the space of a year. So sadly, again, my back started to go out, and it was the second time that it had happened.
Sure,
so I knew roughly what was going to happen and how long it was going to take. And in that time, instead of getting a little bit, again, I'm married to a counselor / psychologist, so I know how the brain works a bit. So I knew that I could either get really depressed and go, oh, like all I can do is lay here and do nothing. Or I could take that forced space to do something with it. And so what I did was, again, I'd already had that conversation with my husband, and the idea of communication had been so strong. And it was my background. I mean, I have a story from when I was in year 2, and I read a book to the class for the first time, and my teacher gave me this massive clap, and just like little moments like that became present to me. It was like speaking, being able to talk, being able to communicate. It's not a bad habit for a kid that talks too much. It's actually a gift and a strength. And nowadays it's a requirement to succeed in life. So I was thinking, well, how do I put all this together with the experience I've had with, anyway. So 3 things hit me really strongly in that time, in that forced rest space, which was, for children, particularly communication in the playground. So friendships, conflict resolution, how to diffuse emotional responses. But how do you teach that to a year 5 kid, And the second one was public speaking, which is something I've never feared, but I understand why it is scary. And I researched the neuroscience behind what the brain's actually doing when we're fearful.
Nice.
And then the third part was, communicating to ourselves. That is the most precious form of communication we need to harness. And kids are constantly telling themselves, I'm not good enough. I'm not as good as her. I can't play soccer like him. And they're constantly on this narrative of I'm not good enough. And so I put those 3 things together. I called it playground, like public and private. And they're my 3 sessions that I do, particularly for year 5 and 6, because they're about to go to high school. And going to high school is not an easy transition. And so what I do is I spend that time with them over 3 sessions, and I role play it, and it's hilarious. Like, I get kids up. I teach them what assertive language is as opposed to passive and aggressive. And I've got teachers up the back of the classroom going to me, keep going. And I've had an assistant principal grab me at the end of the 3 sessions, and he said, Erica, I spend most of my recess and lunch like trying to umpire these fights between these kids and trying to help them understand each other's point of view. What you've done with them today, I'm hoping will give them tools to start doing it even themselves. And that just brings me joy. So that's exciting to me.
Hey, that's amazing. I think an interesting thing that you've touched on there is around this internal narrative that kids have with themselves. And because when they're fighting or they're yelling and screaming instead of having a sensible conversation because they're kids, that's a little bit easier to deal with maybe than that internal narrative where you don't necessarily see or hear what's going on. And especially I'm guessing kids that are in year 5 and 6, they're starting to get mobile phones, about to head to, and they're immersed in social media. And so they're not only seeing that sort of skewed vision of people's lives through Instagram or Facebook, they're having a skewed narrative internally. So how are you trying to address or what benefits do you provide for those sorts of kids?
Well, at the moment, so the program can now, I now have talks for year 1, 2, 3, 4, all of it. But the cornerstone one that I first created was the year 5, 6 one. And in that, I do a little thing where we build a chatterbox. You know, those from when you were little, the little paper thing.
Absolutely.
And in it, it's got the the inside of the chatterbox where you would write all your funny comments.
Yep.
I've got on the left-hand side, what am I working on? So what I do is I try to do what's called positive reframing. And so I have my smiley emoticon ball that I take to the school. And I say, now, and I put up on the PowerPoint, I'm going to put a bunch of phrases up here. If you can relate to any of these, I want you to pop your hand up. And then I throw the ball to them. And they've got to tell it to me in a flipped way. So it might be, I'm terrible at reading. And then you see these little hands. I go, all right, here's what we're going to do. And I throw the ball and they catch it. And I go, what's a different way of looking at that? And after I've given a few examples, it makes you cry. These kids start to say, reading's not my best, but I'm working on it every day. And I go, that's right. And then they throw it back to me. Now, that's a public game. So a lot of the really deep stuff's not going to come out in a game like that. But the principle of it is being reinforced because I do it about 15 times. And then I say sometimes very boldly, I'll go, oh, I've run out of examples. Who's got another example of something that they're not feeling really good about? And someone will go, oh, and one of my favorites is, that girl over there hates me because she didn't talk to me today. And all the teachers again are going, keep going, keep going. And then they'll put a hand up. I'll throw it. Maybe she didn't see me. Maybe I can't assume she's thinking about me. And I go, give them a clap. Anyway, when we get to the chatterbox, there's a column that says, I'm working on. And I challenge them, all the things that in your internal, I use kid words, but in their internal narrative that they're saying, I'm bad at, I want you to write on this piece of paper, but I'm going to change your talk, your language. And it's going to say, I'm working on. So what are some things you could call yourself working on? And then they start to write down the things that in the past they've said, I'm terrible at. Now, the next column says things I'm grateful for. And I say to them, I think you're pretty amazing. I reckon there's at least 3 things you're amazing at, and I want you to write those down for me. Or I want you to write down things that are amazing in your life, like your family or your pet or your soccer team or your dance class. And so now they've got 2 columns. They've got, what am I working on? What am I amazing at? And when we fold the chatterbox all up, the outside is my first session where I explain to them how to deal with their friends. It's got all the information on the outside. When you open it up, it's all my public speaking stuff and how to keep your lid on and how to stay strong on platform. But the internal, no one else gets to see. And I say to them, when you open that up, I want you to see that you're working on things and you're incredible at things. And I have warm fuzzies around the outside from their friends. And so when I fold it all up, I go, no one else needs to ever see that but you. But when you are doubting yourself, I want you to open it up. And I want you to remember that while you got things you're working on, there are still things you're amazing at. And here's what all your friends think of you too. And it's quite profound. And I often walk out from that session a little emotional and kids are hugging me and thanking me. But it's what makes it all worthwhile is that particular session for me.
I mean, it's really powerful stuff. And I think at that age, we can really easily underappreciate the impact that this will have, not just through their teenage years, but as they start to come into the workforce. If they've never spoken to anyone, or, if they can't talk face to face, how are they going to have a job interview? How are they going to do something like this? So do you include things that are sort of setting them on that path, even though they won't know it, just because they're malleable at age 10?
Yeah, well, I think I'm a bit cheeky because, like I say, the very first session I start with, who hates speaking in public? And I go, right, I know who you are now. Yeah, I'm on you. By the third session that I had a couple of months back before we were all quarantined, I got the chance to finally get up one student who I had seen avoiding eye contact with me the entire time, always put his hand as far down as possible when I said who'd like to come out and help. And I looked over at him and I said, how about you come out and help me with this last thing? And this was actually in the session where I'm actually helping them with just some tools of speaking. So I do some just practical level voice, pitch, posture, all that kind of stuff, just for a small part.
Yep.
And all he had to do was a 30-second speech. And he's like, I said, how about you come and I'll help you. You can trust me. So that's part of my job too, is gaining their trust and being a safe person.
Sure.
And he came out and he stood there. And I said, okay. And I have these cards, like little topic cards that I've made. And so this was a birthday speech. I said, you need an in, a little bit of content, and an out. It's my radio background, but that's how you do it.
Yep, sure.
And I said, all right, so we could start with, today is Rob's birthday. I've known him since I was 10. Remember that time we got in trouble for this? So let's all sing. That's your out. That's all he had to do. And he's looking at me going, I can't do it. And I said, well, and I got right in front of him like this. I said, don't worry about the audience. And he stood and he said it to me. I took 2 steps back. He said it again. I took 10 steps back. And in the end, he said it with projection and pace and everything to the crowd. And I nearly cried because I was like, you can do it.
That's amazing.
So helping them overcome that I can't button is huge. I also offer sort of private, sort of like I call them masterclasses for anyone that wants to develop their speaking further. And I just take a small group of kids and teach them more and more about the practical side. But for the kids that can't even get up, these sessions they're not very threatening because there's so many of them listening at the same time. So when I do grab someone like that up, and I said, where's the applause for this? And these kids in this class went nuts.
Right,
they were like,
yeah.
he never does that. So yeah.
That's amazing. When you're spanning most of primary school and beyond, but if we stick with primary school for now, how do you see the differences in what their challenges are when, say, they're in year 2 versus year 6? Because we see very young kids are usually outgoing almost by default before they hit school, but then it's sort of as they evolve intellectually and emotionally that changes. So what sort of things would you try and cover for a younger audience, and how does that sort of progress?
Yeah. So I think, and particularly with the syllabus too for kids at schools, the younger ones, it's all about sort of identifying your emotions. It's like, I feel sad when, or I feel happy when, and sort of working with them to identify emotions. I do a lot of stuff around feel, think, act, not just feel, act. Oh, I feel hurt, I'm going to hurt someone, or and so we throw in this think sort of section there and talk about, how can we, process that? And again, for littlies, I do most of things with games, with emoji stuff, because that's really current right now.
Yeah.
My ball sort of game, the reframing game. But I feel that as they get that little bit older, as we all went through in school, we worry about what our friends think. We've either found a narrative of ourselves either being passive or possibly aggressive. But the assertive piece, they're not really sure about. So one time I always ask at the beginning of that session, who knows what assertive means? And the answers I get are very varied. Like some people will say cranky, some people will say me. And I'm like, okay, great, good to know. And I go through this whole thing and I say, all right, so passive, who can be my passive person today? I get an actor out the front. Who can be my aggressive person? Sometimes I pick the smallest person because it's really cute. and so now they're standing either side of me and I go, I just need one more volunteer, and I get someone. Up on the screen, I put the definitions. And when we get to assertive, it just is someone who can state clearly and effectively what they need and want while being kind and respectful to others. That's a kid kind of version. And then I do a role play. So I say, I'm the canteen lady at school and I didn't give you back your $1. I said, and technically if I was there, I probably would forget because I'm terrible at maths. And they all laugh at me. Now, in your characters, I want you to come and ask me for that $1. Okay, don't forget what your characters are. You're passive, you're aggressive. Okay, cool. And everyone laughs. The passive person goes, never mind, and runs away. The aggressive person comes and threatens to hit me, and I make jokes about that. And then the assertive person says, hi, I'm Erica. I was here a minute ago. You didn't give me my $1, and I kind of need that back. And I go, there it is, give them a clap. One child came up to me and said, I didn't know that's what it was. I thought being assertive meant being mean. So what I'm trying to do is just show them that with their language, with their words, with their communication, they can actually achieve things while still being kind and respectful. There's no need to scream and make your point. You don't have to run away and be dramatic. And I overact for the kids and I go, I'm never going to that school again. And they laugh at me. I go, who's ever done that? And I go, yeah. So how about, let's do an example of, I've overheard someone in the playground say something mean about me. Let's try that one. And then they all go, and they do it.
Yeah.
The passive person, you go. Anyway, at the end of the session, I say to them, if you feel brave, point to who you think you're most like at the moment. And a lot of them point to aggressive. A lot of them point to passive. And then I say, right, here's what we're going to do. Every time a situation comes up, we're going to take a tiny step into the middle until we can call ourselves assertive. It's not going to happen overnight. But every decision you make, we're going to take a step closer to finding the right words, the right tone, the right body language to say what we want, to be strong in what we want, and still be good listeners. So it's a powerful session in that sense.
That's awesome. So I wouldn't mind shifting gears a little bit. Obviously, our intention and some of our focus is on business, and while pretty much a large majority of business owners have kids, and this information is really interesting as well, I want to sort of explore the business side a little bit as well. In particular, the challenge in engaging schools for something like this, and because obviously you're very passionate about this topic, but it's a business as well. And so how do you sort of find that balance between, business decisions and emotional decisions, because you are making such an impact, but ultimately, you need to find that middle ground?
Yeah, it's clearly not my background. Business, organizing business, running a business, no idea when I started. It was just like, I was just saying to my husband this morning, I think I'm possibly the world's most optimistic person. I don't know why. It's just like, I'll start a business. It'll be fine.
Hey, someone's got to be. It might as well be you.
That's really, but because the concept I felt was strong, in that sense, I was like, well, I think I called it a soft start. It's going to do a soft start. I'm just going to throw it out there to a bunch of different people and see if they want to take it up. In the first season of me releasing this, like even the promotional material and all that sort of stuff was just very quickly done and not very effective in a sense, but the idea of teaching children communication obviously took on, because I had a few bookings happen straight away, and I went to the schools and I did it, and they were like, oh, this is great, from here to Sydney and back. And but then I got a little sidetracked because I then started hosting a drive radio show in Melbourne at the same time, because obviously you still need to earn a living even when you're launching a business. And that sort of took over for a little while, but it actually reminded me. So I was on air talking about kids and communication, which is crazy. So it's my same passion coming through in all my different mediums, basically. Or I'd be shooting Sydney Weekender stories and my producers would be like, oh, my kid would so benefit from that, because I could not shut up about it. I was talking about it everywhere I went. And so, so from being able to do a few sessions, I've had a few teachers ask me, would you be interested in speaking at this leadership session? And I'd be like, yeah, what do you want to hear? And then I do customized content. So I wrote some talks around leadership, which I actually just recently presented at Macquarie Uni, because they heard about it. And so things are happening, but I'm not a business guru. I do have friends that are, which has been very, very helpful. And I have people helping me in that area. But as long as the content is strong and the engagement is strong, I just keep doing it. And before Corona happened, I had quite a few bookings I've had to postpone. So just hopefully going to pick them up again when this is all over.
Yeah, of course. And so how did you evolve? Obviously, you started your own podcast. Was that something that was in the works prior to COVID, or was that a result of effectively schools shutting down and us all staying home?
It was escalated. Very quickly escalated. So I had an idea that I would do my sessions in school, and I had an idea to do a podcast around communication, not just kids, although that's primarily what I'm doing in schools. I wanted to talk to all different business and industry professionals around what is clear and helpful communication in your world, and what is hard to deal with communication in your world, and just have the conversation around how can we all improve the way we communicate? Because to me, listening is actually one of the hugest keys of communication. But these days, social media, any kind of media, it's monologues. It's just people telling their opinion, the end. And so I wanted to have the conversation around what is communication in 2020? Anyway, Corona hit and I was like, well, I'm going to have to escalate this and start going. So now I'm interviewing people in all different professions and just saying, how's it going not being in society at the moment, not communicating face-to-face? How is that affecting your business or your work life or your TV, radio, poetry, whatever it is you work in? How are you communicating? And I've found it very fun and very interesting, a lot of the different responses.
That's interesting. And we were a little the same. We had the podcast was slated for something we were doing. We just sort of brought forward those plans a little bit and, not by a huge amount, but it became a focus as things shifted so rapidly. So does that mean you're like with your in-person, once COVID passes, are you looking to do more in a professional setting and in a professional space as well? Or do you think you'll fall back more strongly on the schools and the kids again?
I'm very excited about what could happen after COVID. I think this time does give you a lot of time to dream, as long as you're not being anxious about what's going on in the world. Again, because that part of your brain can take over and
Sure,
you
yeah.
don't get your prefrontal cortex working. But my dream center, before COVID happened, I had a very fun session with two wonderful businesswomen. They saw online, I did a little interview on Triple M about my business. They'd heard it and they said, "This is a bit random, but do you help adults?" I said, "Yeah, absolutely. What do you need?" And they were like, "Well, we present to people in a tour guide business, but sort of lost our confidence in speaking. And I found all these courses around public speaking, but what you talked about, the inner you and your internal stuff, that sounds more like what I need." I said, "I'd love to meet." So I met with these two wonderful women. And after spending an hour or two just chatting through, what is your core belief of your business? What is the message you're trying to send? How do you want to package you? But more than that, when you're standing in front of people, what is it that's holding you back from communicating with clear strength and honesty? And they were like, "This is amazing." I was like, "Oh, cool." And I was scheduled to meet with them again. And of course, we can't until this is all done. But Zoom's been good. But I would love to take some of the building blocks that I've found over the years and the things that work for me and the things that I've seen work into any business organization. Even the teachers at schools at times need that little confidence boost when it comes to communication. So yeah, sky's the limit.
I think, I mean, it's an interesting sort of world we're in right now, and part of it is due to COVID and part is just technology. But, 20 years ago or like when you started working on camera yourself, it was sort of in a very exclusive club of people that would be seen on camera. But
Yep.
these days, everybody's launching content, everyone's launching podcasts because it is that next generation. So do you see the market for, skills training and media training becoming much bigger as a result of that? People just trying to lift the quality of the content they're delivering?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I think this experience I had with these two lovely ladies, first thing, they said to me, "If I'm presenting to a bunch of people, like an audience in a theatre, but I'm in the foyer, I'm so much better in the foyer than I am on the stage." I said, "I can help you with that." So what you're getting in the foyer is cues. You're getting verbal feedback. You're getting facial expressions from the people you're talking to. And so what you do is your spirit lifts with that. Like your brain's going, all the good chemicals are being released. They like me. They affirm me. I can speak confidently. You stand in front of people. No one's looking at you confidently. No one's smiling. You're not getting all those cues. And so I was, helping them to use their own, sounds a bit deep, use their own sense of who they are, what their message is, their passion for what they're talking about to present or to communicate a message the same way you would with someone in a foyer, like a group of people.
Sure.
So I think what we're finding is that everybody's launching content, but sometimes the presenting style might be a bit, "Hey, everybody," and it's a little stilted. And that's not a criticism. It's just they're not finding that, "Oh, I'm talking to one person" thing. I over 700 stories I shot for Sydney Weekender, and every time it was just the four of us there shooting.
Yeah.
You don't have a massive group of people affirming you, and you just have to find it within you to go, "Oh my gosh, look where I am. This is incredible." Like, you've got to find your own joy before you can communicate a message. But if the market's being flooded with a lot of people sort of just regurgitating information, then we lose a little bit of that connection, I think.
I mean, we talk about these skills in a professional setting or, sort of setting kids up for life skills and that sort of thing. But it sort of does work in reverse, even just maintaining friendships and relationships as well, because we get so used to operating in sort of a Chinese wall style context where you can't see, even if someone posts a comment, it's not you don't pick up on that initial interaction. And, so do you see benefit when you train someone professionally or where you address something specifically, say for media training, do they see that benefit carry through, even if it's unintentionally, into their personal lives?
Yeah, I think that, again, like when we talk about communication, I think a lot of people think it's just being able to speak well. And that's okay. I mean, that's kind of what we kind of learn at times. It's like you need to do a public speech for class, or you need to do group work and you need to work together. But one of the most powerful things, and I actually have incorporated this in my sessions for year 5 and 6 and teaching year 5 and 6, it's a little bit hilarious. It's called active listening. And so in active listening, you don't just go, yeah, I know, because that's what kids do.
Sure,
and even
yeah.
my son the other day, I was trying to tell him, he goes, yeah, I know. I go,
Yeah.
really? Do you really know? It's actually feeding back what the person said and possibly attach the emotion to it. So for example, I got 2 boys up to demonstrate. And I said, you've just won the grand final for soccer. You're his mate and you're going to reflect back what he said. So he knows he's been heard. He goes, hey, I won the grand final in soccer and I feel great. I said, great. And he goes, did you get a goal? I went, no. Start again. So we did this for like 15 minutes and it was hilarious. In the end, I got him to say, oh, you won the grand final and you feel great. That's amazing. Now you ask a question. And so it's just a little way of, and on radio, I was on a community radio station and we would do fundraising appeals. And in that, people would ring up with the most heartbreaking stories. And if I had just said, oh, that sucks, here's the phone number. You can't do that, you know? And I'd say, so you find yourself single with 3 kids and a mortgage to pay. Obviously that's going to be stressful. And they're like, yeah. And then they feel safe with you because you've actively listened. And so I think some of the times when I share that information with corporate staff and professionals, they kind of go, yeah, okay, all right. And I said, you can do that with complaints. Hey, I hate your service. Okay, so could you explain a bit more? Yeah, you didn't do this and I felt really let down. So you felt really let down because your expectation wasn't met. And they're like, yeah. And these businesses are like, okay, we can do that. I said, and then it takes the power out of you. You don't have to take it personally. You just can keep it in that realm of, I'm just listening. I'm just feeding back. And
Yeah. It does really translate into, good customer service and you know, having these people feel heard, and then suddenly they can go from angry to, you know, on your side and, you know, collectively find a solution, right? So it's a good business practice.
yeah.
So obviously you've worked in radio and TV, for someone who doesn't really understand that business, being in the business, not the business of radio and TV, what are the sort of the challenges between those two different mediums, where you've got radio, which is obviously, you know, voice only, and you have that caller feedback? What skills can you transfer between, say, that and producing a segment for Weekender where you're standing by the pool?
Yeah, I did stand by the pool quite a lot.
Hey.
Funny story, actually. My kids got asked once when they were really little, what does mummy do? Like, what do your parents do for work? And they said, my dad works at a hospital. What does mum do? She lays by the pool eating chocolate. Because they came on a shoot once where my final piece to camera was I had to pop a chocolate and say something. And that was quite hilarious. I was
Absolutely.
like, no, I do more than that, I promise. So yeah, it's very different. So I had been doing TV for quite a few years on camera before I did my very first radio job. And oh my goodness, the difference between the two mediums hit me pretty hard, in the sense that on radio, you really are speaking to one person, and it's very, I could use the word kind of intimate in a sense, because people really feel they get to know you. And the shows that I had were morning style shows. So it was like lots of talk topics, lots of callers. Hey, what do you think of this? Give me a call. And I ended up talking to a lot of people. Some people were just beautiful and warm and loving, and we would have these great chats. I also had some people that were cranky or angry about whatever we were talking about, and I had to work with that. It stretches you, because it's very vulnerable, and you have to use your communication skills in order to keep a show going and interest for the listener, but also, you know, respect for the caller, but self-protection in case it's getting a bit too close. People follow you on social media, they write to you and ask you questions about yourself. So it's just keeping good boundaries, but also being open and real. I think authenticity would be the main thing. Yeah.
Because it's sort of an interesting thing. The balance between radio and TV is probably not too dissimilar to what people are experiencing now, where they've suddenly been thrown into a work from home environment and gone from board meetings to Skype calls or Zoom calls. And, you know, I think we've all had those experiences where someone sends you a really cranky email, and all you have to do is pick up the phone and talk to them and talk through things. You know, is there anything that you can maybe offer people in terms of translating from a face-to-face where you can pick up on the nuance to more emails, more video calls, something like that?
Yeah, I often have said, particularly to teenagers, because I do speak in high schools as well, there's no tone in a text. There's no tone. The three components of communication are words, tone, and body language. And words are actually only 7%, according to a study. So the words we use can often be completely misconstrued depending on the tone or the delivery or the body language. So I got a text message once, as I often refer to, that says, "Hey, Erica, Merry Christmas. It's been a real low to meet you." And I was like, what? Autocorrect from Joy. And so like, if you took that seriously, you'd bury your head in the sand, you'd become wounded, and you'd go, what? Or you go, oh, that's clearly not what it is. I also myself have received a cranky email in the past from a superior, and I've just gone, yeah, no, I don't, this feels yucky. I don't like this. And I rang, "Hey mate, are we cool? I just feel there's been a misunderstanding." And straight away, tone and words working together. Now you talk about Zoom, you've now got the three working together: words, tone, and body language coming through a screen. And so I think if you can get all three, you're going to get a clearer sense of what the communication is if you're more than an email, a text, or even sometimes a phone call, because you're actually looking at the person, and be able to diffuse conflict by talking it out, I think makes a difference. And then you use your assertive language, not your aggressive and not your passive. So your passive would be, "Oh, fine then," that kind of thing. Aggressive is, "You can't speak to me like that." And the assertive is the active listening. "Hey, so you've got an issue with how I did that. Could you explain to me more so I can understand?" And then once you've done that, you've opened up the channel for communication for someone to say, "Great, I have permission now to tell them." And you've got to remember in your brain, this isn't criticism of your character or who you are. This is just your work. This is just behavioral. We can work through this. That kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, of course. Because I read an article recently that was around this video conferencing trend that's, basically come out of nowhere for everybody. And there was, I think it was an opinion piece, and it was around, can we please turn the cameras off? And I was sort of surprised to read that article, because I feel for people going from an in-person interaction to a remote interaction, having video and audio is far less likely to make mistakes, or, because they're missing that key body language or that key component. Sure, it's different when people are doing it from their lounge room and their dog's walking around the background, or whatever the case may be. But, I mean, do you have any thoughts on why people might be reluctant to use their video?
I think it's confronting. I think a lot of people would be a little intimidated to be seen. Especially, it's funny, my husband and I the other day, he's still going into hospitals and working, he's still counselling.
Sure.
So he's still out in the world, whereas I've been doing a lot of work from home and really only going out when I have to. I'm stay at home, that's what we're doing. But it's funny, you start to think about re-entering the world, and there is a little bit of, how does that work? We've been a little bit institutionalized. I mean, I think they say it only takes 21 days to make a habit. Well, Here we are. And I think people having to do, even what we're doing now, can get a little fearful. Like, I don't want to be seen at the moment. I'm feeling like we're all huddled down and we're all in lockdown. Therefore, I don't want people to see me. But I think if we keep the cameras on, there's something we have to face ourselves, which is we have to see ourselves, and we have to see ourselves in relation to someone else. Otherwise, we are going to get so locked down that we're going to forget how to interact with one another. And when the doors are open and we all come out blinking in the sunlight, we're going to forget how to interact.
Cafes will be empty because everyone's got takeaway anyway. Yeah.
So yeah, I think if you can be brave and have your business meetings and have your work meetings, or even just get on with your friends and remember to look at each other and take the body cues and the tone, it'll keep our communication, I think, stronger than if we just send off text or just write our thoughts and feelings on a wall on a Facebook and not want to hear from anybody else. Because I call that a monologue, and I much prefer life being in a dialogue with others,
Because I think even when we do think about social media interaction, and as you say, posting on a wall and getting a comment is sort of different to getting immediate feedback. But obviously there's tools like a Facebook Live or an Instagram Live or something like that, but they seem to be selectively used. Do you think that's because of those same fears?
I actually did a little video for myself to say I'm making a podcast. Now, I've been presenting almost 20 years, and I was a little nervous.
Yeah.
Like, it was weird. Like, I held my camera and I went, oh, how am I going to do this? What am I going to say? This is weird. I don't get nervous about these things, but for some reason, putting something on Instagram so I think the word for me is authentic. And then authenticity can make you feel vulnerable because you're showing like your true self. There's no filter. There's no producer there. There's no editor making it look good. There's no soundtrack. This is you at your most real. And I think it'll be a good thing for all of us to get through this stage and go, wow, I found a deep sense of vulnerability, but I did it. As well as going, is what I'm saying worth saying? Am I adding to the noise or am I saying something that's going to make a difference? Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. Do you think that's why formats like podcasting, where it's a little bit long form and you can't sort of hide behind the tricks so much, do you think that's why that's becoming so popular as it is, because there's that authenticity component?
I do. I think things are changing. Even in the last few years of working in TV, I've noticed a huge popularity, obviously, as we've all seen, rise in things like reality shows and anything to do with just speaking things out. While I still desperately love travel shows like mine, I think that's still a place for those because we all need to dream and we all need to know that we can go.
Especially when the borders open back up. Yeah.
I can't wait. I think that there has been a shift to hopefully real and authentic, which is why radio is so popular in Australia and does so well. But I think the more we can have these real conversations and hopefully be led by people behind the microphones that have authenticity and great things to say, I think that's why so many people are launching podcasts, because they want to hear conversations of other people and glean what they can from that. Do I agree with it? Do I not? Where do I sit on that? I'm going to listen to this and see what they say.
Yeah, because I mean, I think you can digest something, or you can be a listener to something for a short period of time, and you can be wowed by the cameras, you can be wowed by the sound effects and all that sort of thing. But podcasting in particular is something very unique, where it is, past that first minute or two, it's you either like it or you don't, and there's no real trickery to change someone's opinion of that, right? So we're coming up on time here, but I've really, really enjoyed chatting to you today. So what do you think is next for Communication Generation? Obviously, when COVID passes and a bit of normality returns, do you see a bit of a duality between the podcast and your in-person actions?
Yeah, I really have enjoyed the longer form. Obviously, when you're on radio, you have maybe 3.5 minutes tops to do a segment between songs. So the idea of, having fun with you today, like just being able to explore some topics and ideas speaks to me. Definitely cannot wait to get back in front of kids. I cannot wait to be back in schools. I cannot wait to go further than I've been before. Like I said, I spoke at Macquarie Uni to a group of leaders and achievers with some of the same content that I can tell to Year 6 kids. And they loved it because it's all building blocks on how to be stronger internally so that our communication and our relationships can be stronger and that our well-being is stronger. So if I do that for Year 1 with building blocks, or if I do that for university students just with PowerPoints and my general happiness and energy, I can't wait. I can't wait to start getting back in there and spreading it. And I definitely will continue podcasting. I will see where it goes from here and what the topics will be once COVID's finished. But I think communication is something, if we don't hang on to and we don't invest into, especially in our digital world, we could lose it if we're not careful.
I think it's an interesting skill, and I think when we're younger, we think we'll be better at it when we're older, but really nothing changes unless we work on it.
That's right. And who are we looking to show us how to do it? I think there are some incredible communicators in the world, especially at the moment. But then there's some that just speak and leave. And I go, no, it doesn't work that way. So yeah, I think being able to teach some building blocks and then leaving it with the schools or the teachers or the parents or the businesses to continue on, it's my joy. I just love it.
It's great. So for anyone looking to find you, where do they find you online?
Yeah, absolutely. So communicationgeneration.com.au. There is also, ericadavis.com.au if you want to find me personally. And also there's Communication Generation on Instagram and Facebook and all the rest of them. So yeah, Send me a message and I'd love to catch up.
That sounds amazing. Well, Erica Davis from Communication Generation, it's been a fantastic chat. I've really appreciated your time. And I hope to see you doing some brilliant things once we get past all this ISO. That was going to be a really bad joke, and it actually just failed. But
Well, thank you for having me, because it's been so great getting to talk about this, especially as the business has to pause at the moment. So it's good to relive all my fun, exciting moments that I can't wait to get back to. You've given me joy.
Amazing. I'm so glad. All right. Well, thank you very much, and I wish you best for the future.
Thanks.
There you have it. I hope you really enjoyed this episode, and if you did, please like it, share it, or leave us a review on your favourite platform. It helps us show more of this content to people just like you. Did you pick up on it? You might have been thinking, I've heard this voice before. Eric has actually done the voiceover for our intro for this podcast.